Jack Sheppard, the 4th of March 1702, the 16th of November 1724, or Honest Jack, was a notorious English thief and prison escapee of early 18th century London. Born into a poor family, he was apprenticed as a carpenter but took to theft and burglary in 1723, with little more than a year of his training to complete. He was arrested and imprisoned 5 times in 1724 but escaped 4 times from prison, making him a notorious public figure, and wildly popular with the poorer classes. Ultimately, he was caught, convicted, and hanged at Tyburn, ending his brief criminal career after less than 2 years. The inability of the notorious thief-taker General Jonathan Wild to control Sheppard, and injuries suffered by Wild at the hands of Sheppard's colleague Joseph "Blueskin" Blake led to Wild's downfall. Sheppard was as renowned for his attempts to escape from prison as he was for his crimes. An autobiographical narrative, thought to have been ghostwritten by Daniel Defoe, was sold at his execution, quickly followed by popular plays. The character of Macheath in John Gay's The Beggar's Opera, 1728, was based on Sheppard, keeping him in the limelight for over 100 years. He returned to the public consciousness around 1840, when William Harrison Ainsworth wrote a novel entitled Jack Sheppard, with illustrations by George Cruikshank. The popularity of his tale, and the fear that others would be drawn to emulate his behavior, led the authorities to refuse to license any plays in London with Jack Sheppard in the title for 40 years. Early life. Sheppard was born in White's Row, in London's Spitalfields. He was baptized on the 5th of March, the day after he was born, at St. Dunstan's, Stepney, suggesting a fear of infant mortality by his parents, perhaps because the newborn was weak or sickly. His parents named him after an older brother, John, who had died before his birth. In life, he was better known as Jack, or even Gentleman Jack or Jack the Lad. He had a second brother, Thomas, and a younger sister, Mary. Their father, a carpenter, died while Sheppard was young, and his sister died 2 years later. Unable to support her family without her husband's income, Jack's mother sent him to Mr. Garrett's school, a workhouse near St. Helens Bishopsgate, when he was 6 years old. Sheppard was sent out as a parish apprentice to a cane chair maker, taking a settlement of 20 shillings, but his new master soon died. He was sent out to a second cane chair maker, but Sheppard was treated badly. Finally, when Sheppard was 10, he went to work as a shop boy for William Kneebone, a wool draper with a shop on the Strand. Sheppard's mother had been working for Kneebone since her husband's death. Kneebone taught Sheppard to read and write and apprenticed him to a carpenter, Owen Wood, in Wych Street, off Drury Lane in Covent Garden. Sheppard signed his 7-year indenture on the 2nd of April, 1717. By 1722, Sheppard was showing great promise as a carpenter. Aged 20, he was a small man, only 5 feet 4 inches, 1.63 meters, and lightly built, but deceptively strong. He had a pale face with large, dark eyes, a wide mouth and a quick smile. Despite a slight stutter, his wit made him popular in the taverns of Drury Lane. He served 5 unblemished years of his apprenticeship but then began to be led into crime. Joseph Hayne, a button molder who owned a shop nearby, also ran a tavern named the Black Lion off Drury Lane, which he encouraged the local apprentices to frequent. The Black Lion was visited by criminals such as Joseph "Blueskin" Blake, Sheppard's future partner in crime, and self-proclaimed thief-taker General Jonathan Wild, secretly the linchpin of a criminal empire across London and later Sheppard's implacable enemy. According to Sheppard's autobiography, he had been an innocent until going to Hayne's tavern, but there began an attachment to strong drink and the affections of Elizabeth Lyon, a prostitute also known as Edgeworth Bess, or Edgeworth Bess, from her place of birth at Edgeworth in Middlesex. In his history, Defoe records that Bess was a main lodestone in attracting of him up to this eminence of guilt. Such Sheppard claimed, was the source of his later ruin. Peter Linebaugh offers a more romantic view, that Sheppard's sudden transformation was a liberation from the dull drudgery of indentured labor and that he progressed from pious servitude to self-confident rebellion and leveling. Criminal career. Sheppard threw himself into a hedonistic whirl of drinking and whoring. Inevitably, his carpentry suffered, and he became disobedient to his master. With Lyon's encouragement, Sheppard took to crime in order to augment his legitimate wages. His first recorded theft was in spring 1723, when he engaged in petty shoplifting, stealing 2 silver spoons while on an errand for his master to the Rummer Tavern in Charing Cross. Sheppard's misdeeds went undetected, and he moved on to larger crimes, often stealing goods from the houses where he was working. Finally, he quit the employ of his master on the 2nd of August 1723, with less than 2 years of his apprenticeship left, although he continued to work as a journeyman carpenter. He was not suspected of the crimes, and progressed to burglary, falling in with criminals in Jonathan Wild's gang. He moved to Fulham, living as husband and wife with Lyon at Parsons Green, before moving to Piccadilly. When Lyon was arrested and imprisoned at St. Giles's Roundhouse, the beadle, a Mr. Brown, refused to let Sheppard visit, so he broke in and took her away. Arrested and escaped twice. Sheppard was first arrested after a burglary he committed with his brother, Tom, and his mistress, Lyon, in Clare Market on the 5th of February 1724. Tom, also a carpenter, had already been convicted once for stealing tools from his master the previous autumn and burned in the hand. Tom was arrested again on the 24th of April 1724. Afraid that he would be hanged this time, Tom informed on Jack, and a warrant was issued for Jack's arrest. Jonathan Wild was aware of Sheppard's thefts, as Sheppard had fenced some stolen goods through one of Wild's men, William Field. Wild asked another of his men, James Sykes, known as Hell and Fury, to challenge Sheppard to a game of skittles at Redgate's public house near 7 Dials. Sykes betrayed Sheppard to a Mr. Price, a constable from the parish of St. Giles, to gather the usual £40 reward for giving information leading to the conviction of a felon. The magistrate, Justice Perry, had Sheppard imprisoned overnight on the top floor of St. Giles's Roundhouse pending further questioning, but Sheppard escaped within 3 hours by breaking through the timber ceiling and lowering himself to the ground with a rope fashioned from bedclothes. Still wearing irons, Sheppard coolly joined the crowd that had been attracted by the sounds of his breaking out. He distracted their attention by pointing to the shadows on the roof and shouting that he could see the escapee, and then swiftly departed. On the 19th of May 1724, Sheppard was arrested for a second time, caught in the act of picking a pocket in Leicester Fields, near present-day Leicester Square. He was detained overnight in St. Anne's Roundhouse in Soho and visited there the next day by Lyon. She was recognized as his wife and locked in a cell with him. They appeared before Justice Walters, who sent them to the new prison in Clerkenwell, but they escaped from their cell, known as the Newgate Ward, within a matter of days. By the 25th of May, which on Monday, Sheppard and Lyon had filed through their manacles. They removed a bar from the window and used their knotted bedclothes to descend to ground level. Finding themselves in the yard of the neighboring Bridewell, they clambered over the 22-foot-high, 6.7 meters prison gate to freedom. The feat was widely publicized, not least because Sheppard was only a small man, and Lyon was a large, buxom woman. Third arrest, trial, and third escape. Sheppard's thieving abilities were admired by Jonathan Wild. Wild demanded that Sheppard surrender his stolen goods for Wild to fence, and so take the greater profits, but Sheppard refused. He began to work with Joseph Blueskin Blake, and they burgled Sheppard's former master, William Kneebone, on Sunday the 12th of July 1724. Wild could not permit Sheppard to continue outside his control and began to seek Sheppard's arrest. Unfortunately for Sheppard, his fence, William Field, was one of Wild's men. After Sheppard had a brief foray with Blueskin as highwaymen on the Hampstead Road on Sunday the 19th of July and Monday the 20th of July, Field informed on Sheppard to Wilde. Wilde believed Lyon would know Sheppard's whereabouts, so he plied her with drinks at a brandy shop near Temple Bar until she betrayed him. Sheppard was arrested a third time at Blueskin's mother's brandy shop in Rosemary Lane, east of the Tower of London, later renamed Royal Mint Street, on the 23rd of July by Wilde's henchman, Quilt Arnold. Sheppard was imprisoned in Newgate Prison pending his trial at the next Assize of Oyer and Terminer. He was prosecuted on 3 charges of theft at the Old Bailey, but was acquitted on the first 2 due to lack of evidence. Kneebone, Wilde and Field gave evidence against him on the 3rd charge, the burglary of Kneebone's house. He was convicted on the 12th of August, the case being plainly proved, and sentenced to death. On Monday the 31st of August, the very day when the death warrant arrived from the court in Windsor, setting Friday the 4th of September as the date for his execution, Sheppard escaped. Having loosened an iron bar in a window used when talking to visitors, he was visited by Lyon and Paul Maggot, who distracted the guards while he removed the bar. His slight build enabled him to climb through the resulting gap in the grille, and he was smuggled out of Newgate in women's clothing that his visitors had brought him. He took a coach to Blackfriars Stairs, a boat up the River Thames to the Horse Ferry in Westminster, near the warehouse where he hid his stolen goods, and made good his escape. 4th arrest and final escape. By this point, Sheppard was a hero to a segment of the population, being a Cockney, non-violent, handsome and seemingly able to escape punishment for his crimes at will. He spent a few days out of London, visiting a friend's family in Chipping Warden in Northamptonshire, but was soon back in town. He evaded capture by Wilde and his men but was arrested again on the 9th of September by a posse from Newgate as he hid out on Finchley Common, and returned to the condemned cell at Newgate. His fame had increased with each escape, and he was visited in prison by the great, the good and the curious. His plans to escape in September were thwarted twice when the guards found files and other tools in his cell, and he was transferred to a strong room in Newgate known as the Castle, clapped in leg irons, and chained to 2 metal staples in the floor to prevent further escape attempts. After demonstrating to his jailers that these measures were insufficient, by showing them how he could use a small nail to unlock the horse padlock at will, he was bound more tightly and handcuffed. In his history, Defoe reports that Sheppard made light of his predicament, joking that, "I am the shepherd, and all the jailers in the town are my flock, and I cannot stir into the country, but they are all at my heels bawling after me." Meanwhile, Blueskin Blake was arrested by Wilde and his men on Friday the 9th of October, and Tom, Jack's brother, was transported for robbery on Saturday the 10th of October 1724. New court sessions began on Wednesday the 14th of October, and Blueskin was tried on Thursday the 15th of October, with Field and Wilde again giving evidence. Their accounts were not consistent with the evidence that they gave at Sheppard's trial, but Blueskin was convicted anyway. Enraged, Blueskin attacked Wilde in the courtroom, slashing his throat with a pocket knife and causing an uproar. Wilde was lucky to survive, and his grip over his criminal empire started to slip while he recuperated. Taking advantage of the disturbance, which spread to Newgate Prison next door and continued into the night, Sheppard escaped for the 4th time. He unlocked his handcuffs and removed the chains. Still encumbered by his leg irons, he attempted to climb up the chimney, but his path was blocked by an iron bar set into the brickwork. He removed the bar and used it to break through the ceiling into the Red Room above the Castle, a room which had last been used some 7 years before to confine aristocratic Jacobite prisoners after the Battle of Preston. Still wearing his leg irons as night fell, he then broke through 6 barred doors into the prison chapel, then to the roof of Newgate, 60 feet, 20 meters above the ground. He went back down to his cell to get a blanket, then back to the roof of the prison, and used the blanket to reach the roof of an adjacent house, owned by William Bird, a turner. He broke into Bird's house, and went down the stairs and out into the street at around midnight without disturbing the occupants. Escaping through the streets to the north and west, Sheppard hid in a cowshed in Tottenham, near modern Tottenham Court Road. Spotted by the barn's owner, Sheppard told him that he had escaped from Bridewell Prison, having been imprisoned there for failing to support a non-existent bastard son. His leg irons remained in place for several days until he persuaded a passing shoemaker to accept the considerable sum of 20 shillings to bring a blacksmith's tools and help him remove them, telling him the same tale. His manacles and leg irons were later recovered in the rooms of Kate Cook, one of Sheppard's mistresses. This escape astonished everyone. Daniel Defoe, working as a journalist, wrote an account for John Appleby, The History of the Remarkable Life of John Sheppard. In his history, Defoe reports the belief in Newgate that the devil came in person to assist Sheppard's escape. Final capture. Sheppard's final period of liberty lasted just 2 weeks. He disguised himself as a beggar and returned to the city. He broke into the Rollins Brothers pawnbroker's shop in Drury Lane on the night of the 29th of October 1724, taking a black silk suit, a silver sword, rings, watches, a wig, and other items. He dressed himself as a dandy gentleman and used the proceeds to spend a day and the following evening on the tiles with 2 mistresses. He was arrested a final time in the early morning on the 1st of November, blind drunk, in a handsome suit of black, with a diamond ring and a carnelian ring on his finger, and a fine light tie peruke. This time, Sheppard was placed in the Middlestone room, in the center of Newgate next to the castle, where he could be observed at all times. He was also loaded with 300 pounds of iron weights. He was so celebrated that the jailers charged high society visitors 4 shillings to see him, and the King's painter James Thornhill painted his portrait. Several prominent people sent a petition to King George I, begging for his sentence of death to be commuted to transportation. The concourse of people of tolerable fashion to see him was exceeding great. He was always cheerful and pleasant to a degree, as turning almost everything as was said onto a jest and banter. To a Reverend Wagstaff who visited him, he said, according to Defoe, 1 file's worth all the Bibles in the world. Sheppard came afore Mr. Justice Powys in the Court of King's Bench at Westminster Hall on the 10th of November. He was offered the chance to have his sentence reduced by informing on his associates, but he scorned the offer, and the death sentence was confirmed. The next day, Blueskin was hanged, and Sheppard was moved to the condemned cell. Execution. The following Monday, the 16th of November, Sheppard was taken to the gallows at Tyburn to be hanged. He planned one more escape, but his penknife, intended to cut the ropes binding him on the way to the gallows, was found by a prison warder shortly before he left Newgate for the last time. A joyous procession passed through the streets of London, with Sheppard's cart drawn along Holborn and Oxford Street accompanied by a mounted city marshal and liveried javelin men. The occasion was as much as anything a celebration of Sheppard's life, attended by crowds of up to 200,000, 1/3 of London's population. The procession halted at the City of Oxford Tavern on Oxford Street, where Sheppard drank a pint of sack. A carnival atmosphere pervaded Tyburn, where his official autobiography, published by Appleby and probably ghostwritten by Defoe, was on sale. Sheppard handed a paper to someone as he mounted the scaffold, perhaps as a symbolic endorsement of the account in the narrative. His slight build had aided his previous prison escapes, but it condemned him to a slow death by strangulation from the hangman's noose. After hanging for the prescribed 15 minutes, his body was cut down. The crowd pressed forward to stop his body from being removed, fearing dissection. Their actions inadvertently prevented Sheppard's friends from implementing a plan to take his body to a doctor in an attempt to revive him. His badly mauled remains were recovered later and buried in the churchyard of St. Martin in the Fields that evening. Legacy. There was a spectacular public reaction to Sheppard's deeds. He was even cited favorably as an example in newspapers, pamphlets, broadsheets, and ballads were all devoted to his amazing exploits, and his story was adapted for the stage almost immediately. Harlequin Sheppard, a pantomime by one John Thurmond, subtitled A Night Scene in Grotesque Characters, opened at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane on Saturday the 28th of November, only 2 weeks after Sheppard's hanging. In a famous contemporary sermon, a London preacher drew on Sheppard's popular escapes as a way of holding his congregation's attention: "Let me exhort ye, then, to open the locks of your hearts with the nail of repentance. Burst asunder the fetters of your beloved lusts. Mount the chimney of hope. Take from thence the bar of good resolution. Break through the stone wall of despair." The account of his life remained well known through the Newgate Calendar, and a 3-act farce was published but never produced. But, mixed with songs, it became the Quaker's Opera, later performed at Bartholomew Fair. An imagined dialogue between Jack Sheppard and Julius Caesar was published in the British Journal on the 4th of December 1724, in which Sheppard favorably compares his virtues and exploits to those of Caesar. Perhaps the most prominent play based on Sheppard's life is John Guy's The Beggar's Opera, 1728. Sheppard was the inspiration for the figure of Macheath. His nemesis, Peachum, is based on Jonathan Wild. The play was spectacularly popular, restoring the fortune that Gay had lost in the South Sea Bubble, and was produced regularly for over 100 years. An unperformed but published play, The Prison Breaker, was turned into the Quaker's Opera, in imitation of the Beggar's Opera, and performed at Bartholomew Fair in 1725 and 1728. 2 centuries later, the Beggar's Opera was the basis for the Threepenny Opera of Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill, 1928. Sheppard's tale may have been an inspiration for William Hogarth's 1747 series of 12 engravings, Industry and Idleness, which shows the parallel descent of an apprentice, Tom Idle, into crime and eventually to the gallows, beside the rise of his fellow apprentice, Francis Goodchild, who marries his master's daughter and takes over his business, becoming wealthy as a result, eventually emulating Dick Whittington to become Lord Mayor of London. Sheppard's tale was revived in the first half of the 19th century. A melodrama, Jack Sheppard, The Housebreaker, or London in 1724, by W. T. Moncrieff was published in 1825. More successful was William Harrison Ainsworth's third novel, entitled Jack Sheppard, which was originally published in Bentley's Miscellany from January 1839 with illustrations by George Cruikshank, overlapping with the final episodes of Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. An archetypal Newgate novel, it generally remains close to the facts of Sheppard's life, but portrays him as a swashbuckling hero. Like Hogarth's Prince, the novel pairs the descent of the idle apprentice into crime with the rise of a typical melodramatic character, Thames Darrell, a foundling of aristocratic birth who defeats his evil uncle to recover his fortune. Cruikshank's images perfectly complemented Ainsworth's tale. Thackeray wrote that Mr. Cruikshank really created the tale, and that Mr. Ainsworth, as it were, only put words to it. The novel quickly became very popular. It was published in book form later that year, before the serialized version was completed, and even outsold early editions of Oliver Twist. Ainsworth's novel was adapted into a successful play by John Buckstone in October 1839 at the Adelphi Theatre, starring, strangely enough, Marianne Keeley. Indeed, it seems likely that Cruikshank's illustrations were deliberately created in a form that were informed by, and would be easy to repeat as, tableau on stage. It has been described as the exemplary climax of the pictorial novel dramatized pictorially. The story generated a form of cultural mania, embellished by pamphlets, prints, cartoons, plays and souvenirs, not repeated until George du Maurier's Trilby in 1895. By early 1840, a cant song from Buckstone's play, Nix My Dolly, Pals, Fake Away, was reported to be deafening us in the streets. public alarm at the possibility that young people would emulate Sheppard's behavior led the Lord Chamberlain to ban, at least in London, the licensing of any plays with Jack Sheppard in the title for 40 years. The fear may not have been entirely unfounded. Courvoisier, the valet of Lord William Russell, claimed in one of his several confessions that the book had inspired him to murder his master. Frank and Jesse James wrote letters to the Kansas City Star signed, Jack Sheppard. Nevertheless, burlesques of the story were written after the ban was lifted, including a popular Gaiety Theatre, London piece called Little Jack Sheppard, 1886 by Henry Pottinger Stevens and William Yardley, which starred Nellie Farren as Jack. The Sheppard story has been revived 3 times on film in the 20th century. The Hairbreadth Escape of Jack Sheppard, 1900, Jack Sheppard, 1923, and Where's Jack? 1969. A British costume drama directed by James Clavell with Tommy Steele in the title role. Jake Arnott features him in his 2017 novel The Fatal Tree. In Confessions of the Fox, a 2018 novel by Jordy Rosenberg, the Sheppard story was recontextualized as a queer narrative. In 1971, British glam rock band Chicory Tip paid tribute to Sheppard in Don't Hang Jack, the B-side to I Love Onions. The song, apparently sung from the viewpoint of a witness in the courtroom, describes Jack's daring exploits as a thief, and futilely begs the judge to spare Sheppard because he was loved by the women of the town, and idolized by the lads who made him their king. In Jordy Rosenberg's 2018 novel Confessions of the Fox, a 21st-century academic discovers a manuscript containing Sheppard's confessions, which tell the story of his childhood and his love affair with Edgeworth Bess, and make the unlikely revelation that he was a transgender man. The reasons for the lasting legacy of Jack Sheppard's exploits in the popular imagination have been addressed by Peter Linebaugh, who suggests that Sheppard's legend was rooted in the prospect of excarceration, of escape from what Michel Foucault called in Folie at Deraison called the Grand Renferment, Great Confinement, in which unreasonable members of the population were locked away and institutionalized. Linebaugh further suggests that he laws leveled at Sheppard and similar working-class criminals were a means of disciplining a potentially rebellious multitude into accepting increasingly harsh property laws, although crime has been punished in every era and even more straitly in the past. A more balanced 19th-century view on the Jack Sheppard phenomenon was offered by Charles Mackay in Memoirs of Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Whether it be that the multitude, feeling the pangs of poverty, sympathize with the daring and ingenious predators who take away the rich man's superfluity, or whether it be the interest that mankind in general feel for the records of perilous adventure, it is certain that the populace of all countries look with admiration upon great and successful thieves. See also List of fugitives from justice who are no longer sought. Notes. References anon. The Bloody Register Volume 2 London, 1764. Buckley, Matthew. Sensations of Celebrity, Jack Sheppard and the Mass Audience, Victorian Studies, Volume 44, Number 3, Spring 2002, pages 423-463. Defoe, Daniel. The History of the Remarkable Life of John Sheppard. London, 1724. Retrieved 5 February 2007. Howson, Gerald. Thief-Taker General, Jonathan Wild and the Emergence of Crime and Corruption as a Way of Life in 18th-Century England. New Brunswick, N.J. and Oxford, UK, 1970. ISBN 0-88738-032-8. Linebaugh, Peter. The London Hanged, Crime and Civil Society in the 18th Century. Verso, 2003, ISBN 1-85984-638-6. Lynch, Jack. Editor. Jack Sheppard, From the Complete Newgate Calendar. Retrieved 5 February 2007. Mackay, Charles. Memoirs of Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Wordsworth Editions. 1841-1999 edition. ISBN 1-890151-40-8. Moore, Lucy. The Thieves' Opera. Viking, 1997, ISBN 0-670-87215-6. Mullen, John, and Christopher Reed. 18th Century Popular Culture, A Selection. Oxford University Press, 2000. ISBN 0-19-871134-4. Norden, Victor. Early 18th Century Newspaper Reports. A Sourcebook, Jack Sheppard, Jailbreaker. Retrieved 5 February 2007. Sugden, Philip. John Sheppard in Matthew, HCG and Brian Harrison, eds. The Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. Volume 50, 261-263. London, OUP, 2004. Further reading proceedings from the Old Bailey. Ordinary's account of the 4th of September 1724. Reference docket T1724081252. Anon, often attributed to Defoe. A narrative of all the robberies, escapes, etc. of John Sheppard. 1724. Blakely, Horace. Trial of Jack Sheppard. W. M. Gaunt and Sons, 1933-1996 edition. ISBN 1-56169-117-8. G.E. Authentic Memoirs of the Life and Surprising Adventures of John Sheppard by way of familiar letters from a gentleman in town. 1724. Gatrell, V.A. The Hanging Tree, Execution in the English People 1770-1868. Oxford University Press, 1996. ISBN 0-19-285332-5. Hibbert, Christopher. The Road to Tyburn. The Story of Jack Sheppard and the 18th Century London Underworld. New York, The World Publishing Company, 1957. 2001 Penguin reprint. ISBN 0-14-139023-9. Linan, Fergus. The Encyclopedia of London Crime. Sutton Publishing, 2003. ISBN 0-7509-3302-X. Mizell, Martin. 1983 Realizations, Narrative, Pictorial and Theatrical Arts in 19th Century England. Princeton. Rawlings, Philip. Drunks, Whores, and Idle Apprentices, Criminal Biographies of the 18th Century. Routledge, UK, 1992. ISBN 0-415-05056-1. Rogers, Pat. Daniel Defoe, The Critical Heritage. Routledge, UK, 1995. ISBN 0-415-13423-4. External links. Jack Sheppard, from the Newgate Calendar, including contemporary sermon. Retrieved 5 February 2007. Project Gutenberg e-text of William Harrison Ainsworth's novel, The Thief-Taker Hangings. How Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Wild, and Jack Sheppard captivated London and created the celebrity criminal by Aaron Skirball.